Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, wherever you're at. Welcome to our first Maven STD Information System Users Group call of 2016. I think we're going to have a great call today. We have a really good presentation, and we have participation from Consilience, and we're really looking forward to a lot of good questions and discussion from all our participants. So this is your call. We want everybody to be really engaged and talk on the call. And we're going to try something different. We haven't had a lot of success in the past, but we've made a few changes. We're going to try to keep the lines unmuted so people will be able to ask questions. But in order to do that, we really need your assistance. And what we need everybody to do is, unless you're not talking, you've got to keep your phones muted. Because if you don't, we can hear conversations as well as we can hear people typing and noise, and it just doesn't work. But we did a call yesterday where we kept the phones muted, and we would much rather be able to have dialogue and questions. So, please do that. We are going to do a roll call, and then we'll ask everybody to unmute your local phones for that. But then as soon as you tell us your name and stuff, then ask you to mute your phone unless you want to ask a question. So, again, if everybody could be really diligent on that, because it is really important, because all it takes is one or two people to be having a conversation, and you just can't do it. So anyways, enough of the negative talk. If for some reason I'm the chairperson on the call, if I lose my internet connection, Marvin Fleming should be able to take over the call until I get reconnected. So, we do hopefully have some redundancy. If you have any questions, or want to comment like you can't hear or do something, you feel free to use the chat function, which should be on the lower left-hand portion of your screen. So without further ado, let's get started. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Charlie Ravens. I'm with the National Coalition of STD Directors, and I'm working with my counterpart at the Centers for Disease Control, Marvin Fleming. And together, both CDC and NCSD, probably for about a year now, have been operating users groups primarily for Maven and PRISM. And just so everybody, we know we have some new people on the call, and just to remind everybody who's been on here, these calls are really intended for apps grantees who are using Maven as their primary STD case reporting and management information system. And the purposes of this user group and our calls are really to identify and share best practices, coming up with common solutions to common problems, learning from each other, getting some technical assistance, and really having an opportunity to share resources and discuss issues with CDC, NCSD, and now we're adding Consilience. So I apologize, I used the slides from yesterday. I forgot to change it, so it should be from Consilience, and we'll change the slides before we post them up. So before we get started with the agenda, just a really quick poll questions to see who's on the call, make sure we're hitting our target audience. So if you could just indicate where you primarily work, and just once you hit select a choice and hit submit, you'll be able to see the poll result. So we'll give everybody about 10 more seconds to respond. So, overall, it looks like we're reaching almost 70%, 65% of our participants are from either a state or a local health department, and a few IT contractors or vendors. So that's, really exciting that the calls are reaching the people that we want to, Maven users. So let's move on to the agenda. So we'll do a welcome and introduction, and we'll do a quick roll call after I get through the agenda, just because we want to see who's on the call. Then I'll do a really quick update from NCSD. Marvin Fleming and Ninad Mishra will do an update from the CDC Surveillance and Data Management Branch. And then we're going to have Michelle Brazel from, and if I mispronounce your name, I apologize, from Consilience. And then Robin Hennessy from New York is going to give us our sort of presentation du jour on importing large data sets into Maven, and we'll have open discussion and questions both to Robin, and then we can hopefully have some time for some general questions and issues that other people are facing. And then if we have time, we want to talk about NPIN user experience, but that's only if we have enough time. And then we'll just wrap up. And just one of the things is, these are your calls, so if we need to, if we get into a really good discussion, we will change the agenda. It's not a problem. So these are your calls. So without further ado, let's do the roll call. And so remember to unmute your phones for the roll call. I'll just call out each project area, and you can just tell us who's online from your project area. So we'll start out with Chicago. Remember to unmute your phones. So is anybody on from Chicago?
Yes. Hi, it's Lisa Varela and Irina Tabice.
Okay. Connecticut. Hawaii.
This is Luke Hasty, Charlie.
Okay, hi, Luke. Massachusetts. Minnesota.
This is Dawn Ginzel and Julie Hanson-Perez.
Okay. New York City.
Robin Hennessy.
North Carolina.
Hi, Mara Larson.
South Carolina. North Dakota.
Hey, this is
Lisa Webb with North Dakota.
Oh, and Lizzie Vanderbush and Lexi Barber are on the phone.
Okay, South Dakota. Texas.
Tammy Foster.
Who?
This
Okay,
is Tammy.
Virginia.
Okay.
Steve Barber and group.
Okay. Washington State.
Mark Aubin.
Hill
Okay.
Bell.
And Washington, D.C. Okay, great. So remember, everybody, please mute your phones unless you're going to be talking. Right now, I think in the group we have 14 project areas, and we've heard of one or two that might be either planning or just starting the planning phase for Maven, and around 45 members of the participant group. So sometime this week, I will send out an updated participant list. If you could all, when you get it, if you look at it and if it's fine, you don't need to do anything. If you notice that you need to update your phone number, your title, or somebody's dropped off from your group or added to the group, if you could just update the spreadsheet and send it back to me, and we'll once we get it back from everybody, we will either get it out or we'll post it up to NPIN. And remember, that list is really helpful to all of you because if you're working on an issue and somebody else might be, this is a great way to be able to contact somebody or find out what some of the issues, maybe they're already in the development stage and you're only in the planning stage. So we really make that as a useful tool. So as far as the NCS update, we are for 2016 we'll continue to support the users groups. We think obviously surveillance and surveillance systems is essential to having excellent STD programs, and so anything we can do organizationally to help you have good STD programs, we'll do that. So we'll continue to support that. We did have a session at the annual meeting that we just had in Savannah on surveillance, and had some really good discussions and presentations from all the different systems that people were using. And then we broke up into groups, and so we did have a Maven discussion as well as a PRISM and some other discussions. And I think one of the things that really came out of those meetings is both the vendors for Maven and PRISM were there in their respective groups, and I think it really showed the value of having them involved in discussion. So we are now adding consilience to our quarterly calls, and we know they have another work group, but this is really another chance for them to really interact with our members and answer questions, as well as a chance for you all to sort of tell them what you need and how they can better serve your needs. If you have any TA questions, again, go to your colleagues. Use the NPIN site. I think it is a good tool to. We've had some good questions and answers and conversations. If you're running into a roadblock, or maybe if you've had a really good development, that'd be a great way to do that. And then the last thing is CDC is going to be having a consultation on syphilis in about 2 weeks. I'm going to be there, and if you have any issues or questions related to syphilis surveillance, especially using Maven or in general, feel free to send me those questions, and I can make sure that those questions get raised at the summit. So that's the NCSD update, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Marvin Fleming at CDC. Marvin?
Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin Fleming. I'm part of the Surveillance and Data Management branch on the Informatics team. And we're going to make this update a regular part of our meetings. So I'll go ahead and jump in. There's not a lot to report on the message mapping guide. In the fall of 2015, the project changed vendors, and the new contractor is still getting up to speed on the MMG process. This has caused a delay to the project, and it is now estimated that the MMG will be released in the spring of 2016. The congenital syphilis and STD MMGs are considered to be at Stage 2, Pilot Test Ready Draft Phase. The draft guides and artifacts are provided to local, state, and territorial jurisdictions that are part of the NMI pilot testing process. However, they are also posted online for other jurisdictions that would like the opportunity to examine them. We will be posting the slides onto the NPIN site, and the underlined portion on this slide is actually a link. And if you click on that link, it will take you to the MMG website. And this is a place that you can go to get the most recent information about the MMG process. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, the next update is on ELC. The Epidemiology and Laboratory Capacity Health Information Systems project will be setting up calls to review 2015 ELR data. Whoa.
Yeah, if you're not presenting, please don't touch the slides for those people that have access. Thanks.
Information will be coming to the documented ELC coordinators within each project area in February in order to prepare their 2015 spreadsheets. The calls will be scheduled for between March and May of this year. The reason for sharing this information with this user group is so that you are aware of the role SCD is playing in this national project and to encourage conversation at the local levels as subject matter experts, and hopefully to potentially expedite the process. And there are certain points I'd like to read off for the group. Like each project site represented in the user group has an ELC coordinator responsible for the provision of this data and attendance on the regular scheduled quarterly progress calls. While the numerator information will be ELR data, the denominator volume is based on the estimate of the total volume of laboratory reports received by your jurisdiction by disease category, regardless of method. Volume refers to the number of lab records. Volume does not refer to the number of results or the number of cases. Volume also does not include duplicate reports. Volume does not include reports that are received but aren't reportable for your jurisdiction. And if a lab is counted in the ELR volume, it should be counted in the total denominator volume as well. This is a listing of the 25 STD conditions that can be counted towards volume. And briefly, I just wanted to mention that the next STD Surveillance Coordinator quarterly call will be held on February 8th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, when you get these slides, anything that's underlined, they are actual links to facilitate you joining that call. And that's it for CDC updates. Take it away, Charlie.
Okay. Any questions for Marvin before we move on? Okay, we're going to hear an update from Consilience in a second, but before we do, I've got a couple poll questions that sort of relate to what Michelle is going to talk about. So let's move to the poll questions. So the first one is, do you plan to utilize Maven's conjoint or co-infection case functionality? And so if you're not a Maven user, you can put not applicable, or if you're a Maven user but you're not sure, just feel free to use not sure, as well as the other answers. So far, about half of you, a little bit almost half of you, are planning to use that conjoint functionality. And I'm sure Michelle's going to be talking about that in a minute. And then our next poll question is, do you plan to utilize Maven's affiliated case functionality? So just take a second to respond. And like the first question, about half of you are planning on it, and hopefully, with Michelle's discussion, maybe more people will consider using it. So, without further ado, I'm going to have Michelle give us an update. Michelle?
Hey everyone, it's Michelle. I know many of you, but some of you I haven't met yet, so I look forward to having a chance to meet with some of you guys who I haven't yet met. I am, for those of you who I haven't met, I'm the Customer Success Director for Consilience Software, and so generally speaking, I work with the customers who are already in production, although I also have quite a bit of interaction with those of you guys who are still actually trying to get into production as well. So feel free to reach out if you need anything from me at any point. And actually, thank you for the poll results. Those are not actually topics that I was necessarily planning to talk about today because you guys have already heard about them. We went over the functionality at our Maven meeting in December. But if you missed that, or if you are interested in getting more information on this functionality, please reach out to me and I can send you the link where everything was recorded, because we also recorded that presentation as well. But when Charlie reached out to me and asked me if I could do a presentation at this meeting, he had kind of asked if I could talk for 5 or 10 minutes, which for those of you who know me, that's asking a lot because I don't talk for only 5 or 10 minutes. But he wanted me to talk specifically about some of the things that are going to come this year in our product. So I kind of put together a little bit of a list, and I thought I'd go over that stuff right now, and then I can answer whatever questions you guys have. So one of the things that was released in Maven 5.4, I think, is something called a distinct ID. The distinct ID is cool because it's a unique identifier, and where we're using it primarily is within repeatable blocks. So for any of you who have ever heard of or heard us talk about dynamic lists, these distinct IDs are going to be the value stored by the dynamic list. So for example, let's say you have a repeatable block of, let's say, interviews that have occurred with your original patient. So let's say you had 3 interviews with the original patient. If we've set up your system using this distinct identifier, then when you go and you enter information about a partner, you'll be able to reference which interview you have derived the information from. So this is going to come into play later on when we get to this next topic, which is the extract field linking. Currently, for those of you who are using any kind of denormalized tables, you have the capacity to create an extract from the denormalized tables. But we've got kind of limited capacity at the moment for how you can link the different fields within the tables. And we're going to be expanding on that, and we're going to be able to use this distinct ID to be able to link stuff together. So you'll be able to easily see which partners were elicited from which interviews, etc. So I think that's going to be really useful in the future. And then next, I think some of you already are aware of this, but we have our user-specific settings, which are coming this year in Maven 6.0. What that's going to allow for is things like you can specify your favorite workflows and other things that you want to see showing up on the splash screen, for example, so that your screen doesn't necessarily look like everybody else's screen who has the same job as you. And I think that's going to be really helpful. And I've already seen kind of the back end part of it starting to be coming to fruition, so it's really cool. And then lastly, I'm not sure if any of you even are aware about this one. Most of you know about the data transformation engine that we showed in the MUG conference in June. That was to export data, but we've recently been working on one to import data as well. So I'm referring to these as the DTE and the DTI, data transformation export and data transformation import. So the DTI is going to allow for importing data from HL7 format, and hopefully not too long after that, we're going to also be able to import MIF files. So in theory, South Dakota would be able to send a MIF to North Dakota. North Dakota would be able to use this importer to map the fields so that the data that they import will come in correctly and create a case in their system that uses the data that was collected in South Dakota. Does anybody have questions on any of that stuff or need me to expound on anything? I think you can unmute yourself to ask me the question.
Correct.
Hi, Michelle. This is Julie in Washington.
Okay. Hi, Julie.
So these are all coming in version 6.0, and they're all just part of the base release. Because the DTA was sort of an add-on piece, and I just was curious if the DTI is just part of base.
No, the DTE and DTI are going to be together, so you do need to have a separate license for them, and that's an excellent point. I should have mentioned that. Thank you for asking that question. But if you buy the DTE, you get the DTI.
Other questions for Michelle?
Hey, Michelle, this is Virginia. Question on the data importer, like in HL7 format. Do you know what version of HL7 format that will support?
I should know this. It's I know 2.5.1 is for sure, and then I think there's a range that surrounds the 2.5.1 version. Was that right?
No, Nihar.
Oh, okay. Hi, Nihar.
Hey.
Okay, any other questions?
Sorry, Nihar, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Michelle? And feel free if you have any, and you think of them as we move on, you can send them into the chat, and we can get those to Michelle, as well as, again, you always can contact her directly. We know that Consilience does have their own user group, but I think this group is a little bit different, and so we try not to duplicate what we're doing, but really supplement each other and support each other. So, if there is a topic that you would like Michelle to present at this group in more depth, so we can, please let us know, and we can, if there's a topic you really want her to expound on. So, All right, thanks, Michelle. And again, we're going to work closely with Consilience over the next year to make sure that, again, the users group is another tool to help meet your needs. So we're going to next have a presentation from Robin in New York. I'm going to be advancing the slides. And before I turn it over to Robin, we got one quick poll question that sort of relates to her topic. And so the question is, it should be, does your program import large data sets into, and it should be Maven, I'm sorry. I knew this would happen to me at least once. So if it doesn't apply to you, put no, or if you're not sure, remember it's Maven and not PRISM. So it looks like about half of you are importing large sets, and for those of you that aren't or are not sure, we don't know whether it's a technical issue or whatever. So again, we'll get the question fixed, but I think that's potentially some helpful information for Robin to know. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Robin Hennessy in New York. Robin?
Hello, I'm here. And like Michelle, I also can talk forever, not just 5 to 10 minutes, so cut me off if I go on and on. Additionally, I'm happy that Michelle is on the line to keep me honest in case I have misrepresented anything. That said, I'm going to talk about how New York City STD imported EHARS records into Maven. And I think we can go right to the next slide. So just a very brief overview. We're separate programs in New York City. STD uses Maven, HIV uses EHARS. There have been approximately 250,000 people diagnosed with HIV/AIDS in New York City since the beginning of HIV/AIDS surveillance. And there's been lots of prohibitive state laws around sharing that information, and that was recently revised, and we wanted to jump on that. Next slide, please. So now that we can actually share the data, how do we go about doing that? And so we explored real-time matches and system integrations, and while that is the gold standard and it would be great to have sort of real-time connections, at this time we had too many institutional and technological barriers, and so we tried to figure out what we, as in the Maven user, could do completely on our own. So the HIV program agreed to give us a line list of the 250,000 people so that we could import it into Maven, which was pretty unprecedented and sort of amazing. The catch was that it's the agreement that we would only import HIV data for people already known to STD Maven. And so that added a sort of a new sort of bug that we didn't really know how to work with. The import roster functionality in Maven did not appear to be robust enough for this process. Can only do about 500 records at a time, and maybe that's just the New York processing speed. And additionally, we were not able to limit to only people already in our Maven system. Next. So we were exploring some other Maven functionality, and folks that have already set up data connections to Maven, like having their ELR come in automatically, may or may not know that those data have to be converted to Maven-specific XML or Maven integration format, or MIF that I'll refer to. And so the dates and the reference codes and all the rules are very specific in these MIFs to direct how this data should act when it gets in, or how it should properly get into Maven. It includes the model fields, the party fields, whether something is repeatable, deduplication logic, is it write once, is it overwrite, etc. And each data source requires its own MIF. So if you have automatic ELR coming in, there's one MIF. If you have other kinds of data reports coming in from EHRs, etc., they have their own definitions. And the MIF import can handle really large volumes of data and can be set up to automatically retrieve and import. And we were very lucky that one of our other New York City Maven users, the Bureau of Communicable Disease, they created, I don't know if they paid for it or they just asked for Consilience to build them, a process that would sort of review to determine whether the people already existed in Maven before importing. So that was the key functionality that we needed and we're happy to use in this process. Next. Next slide.
I'm trying.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so creating a MIF. This is not as easy as it might sound, or maybe it doesn't sound easy, but it's not. So MIF can be created by XML generating software or people who can write XML code. I think that that's correct. But the New York City Maven programs did not really have resources to do that. Maybe our IT people had those resources, but we did not. That said, we had expertise in SAS, and so again, the Communicable Disease Program wrote some SAS programs to create MIFs. And as I said earlier, each MIF is tailored to the data being imported. Some important notes that the MIFs are pretty particular. Blank values in party and party attribute fields must be removed, and these are the source of many errors when doing the importing. And I believe that the next section says the same thing. Specific, get rid of incorrect blank spaces, and it's case sensitive. Here is an example of the SAS code used to generate the XML. Now again, that's not sort of a standard way of doing it, but here it is, and I believe that we'd be willing to sort of share this code to generate an XML. Next. And then this is what the MIF looks like after we have created it using SAS. And so this is the file that would be used to then import into Maven. Next. So we did as much as we could to really, really clean the data as like we scrubbed it, removed all bad variables. We ensured all the variables match the Maven format, and the cleaner you can make this data, the better it will when it comes into Maven and how easily the MIF will be created. So after you've sort of cleaned your data, you create a MIF with a sample set of data, and again we use SAS. And then Maven has this functionality within the administrative console, and you should be doing all of this in a test environment, obviously. And as you can see, you go to the Advanced tab, Data Management tab, Import Integration, Format XML Data File. And that's the area where you can test a couple of MIFs, but you don't want to use that for really large sets. So then you do a lot of testing to fix any formatting errors in your MIF. And I should say that I didn't do any of this work. I managed it, and the person who did the majority of the work, Saring Shoden, she says that this was the most labor-intensive part of the process, just making sure that that MIF was exactly how it needed to be. Then after you have your MIF how it should be, you need to test the import and make sure that the data is actually behaving the way you expect it to. And if it doesn't, you go back and you update your MIF. When the MIF and the data are final, then instead of using the administrative console to import these data, you can go to the data import processor, which is the advanced processing modules, to schedule an import. After doing that, you need to test to determine your file size and import time. 250,000 was the maximum file size that New York City could handle at one time, so we ended up having to create 10 10 data sets to be imported over a number of days. And MIFs can be imported into Maven during regular business hours. We were concerned about performance, and we might not have had to have been worried about that, but we did schedule them for after 5 p.m. just in case. Next. So our results were, the overall data set was 232 some odd people. We imported with a full match 33,000 of them, or almost 15% of the file. And then there was this other 10% that came in as partial matches. So what that also means is that 75% of the file were people that were not even remotely in STD Maven at all, and they didn't get brought into our system, and we pre-reviewed them and did not even bring them into Maven. So bumps along the way, which are always to be expected, but I think that the many iterations of the MIF was a little surprising as to how detailed that had to be and specific. Unrelated to the import, the data and the system, we actually learned a core bug in the way that Maven handles Social Security numbers, and it has been fixed, but that was something we were not expecting. And then despite rigorous testing in UAT, production was a different story. In UAT, we were able to actually import 50,000 records at a time, but not in production. As I said, we had to knock it down to 225,000. And then the number of partial matches, which was 10%, was far greater than what UAT indicated. And so the next time we're likely to only import full matches because let me just tell you, we did this, I can't remember when it happened. It was in May, I think. And as you might imagine, we're still going through that 20,000 partial matches to determine whether we're going to keep them in Maven or not. So I did want to just acknowledge that the Bureau of HIV for actually trusting us with a line list of 250,000 people. The Bureau of Communicable Disease was critical in this process, specifically Jennifer and Natasha, because again they had developed the SAS program to create the MIF, and it was their push to have Consilience develop the pre-import process, which did duplication before actually importing. And then finally, Suring Shodan, who I don't know if she actually made it onto the call today. She's actually left STD but still working on Maven, and she did such an incredible amount of work to make that happen, and I'm still not even sure how we're going to survive without her. Anyway, we would definitely be happy to talk to folks more if they're thinking about using this type of process to bring in, really like huge data sets, not 500 or 1,000, but really big ones. Although it did sound interesting what Michelle had mentioned with the DTI, so maybe that will actually complement the process that we've been able to come up with. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Robin, that was a great presentation. I think this is a good example, and we're going to try to, for each of our calls, always have sort of a participant presentation on sort of a new feature or something that other people might be able to share and learn. We have about 5 minutes where we can take some questions for Robin. If you have any, remember to unmute your phone and ask away. So any questions for Robin? So if you don't have any questions or you think of something later, feel free to use the chat or have Robin's contact information. And again, we will be posting these slides on NPIN within the next week. As soon as we get the recording up, we'll have everything. So you'll be able to pick Robin's brain or anybody else on questions related to this. I think we had a question earlier from Sarah. Sarah, did we answer your question through chat? And if we didn't, let us know and we can answer it now. And if not, we'll move ahead.
Well, I believe Sarah's question was about the topic of denormalized tables.
Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Marvin in a second. Marvin, you want to take it away and talk about denormalized tables and our next presentation, next meeting?
Okay. Well, Minnesota has graciously offered to present on exporting denormalized tables from Maven. They were actually going to present this meeting, but there were some questions about what would the group like to see. So I'd like to have people comment on what issues or procedures would you want to be covered in a presentation around exporting denormalized tables. So if you could take your phones off mute, and I'm sure that Minnesota is anxiously listening in. So what would you like to see in the next presentation around denormalized tables?
Hi, this is Robin in New York. I think I would be interested in learning about sort of the best practices, like what have they learned through the various iterations of BI tables? What are the important things to consider when creating a denormalized table?
Okay. Trying to find Sarah's question. Oh, Sarah's question was, can the denormalized criterion guidelines be shared? Well, the NPEN site is the resource that we are using to share materials. So we can post a question on there and ask people to post their materials on that site.
And I think Sarah Solar had a question about the ELC denominator criteria you were talking about earlier in your overview presentation or update presentation.
Okay. I'm going through the chat. I apologize.
Well, I'll just read the question. It's
thank you. Please do.
Can you talk about the ELC denominator criteria you talked about in your update?
Oh, the denominator criteria.
Yeah.
Well, basically what that is that all labs that are completed by your laboratory, it's not the number of results, but the actual number of tests. I'm not quite sure if that's answering your question, but it's based on an estimate of the total volume of laboratory reports received by your jurisdiction.
And I would say, and I think
ahead.
if Sarah has any more questions, she can maybe email you or call you up to ask specifically.
That probably would be best because I'm not an expert on ELC, but I do work with some experts, and I can give a response on the NPEN site as well.
Okay, so any other questions or suggestions on the exporting denormalized tables?
Because we really want to make sure that the next presentation is what you guys are looking for.
This is Mara with North Carolina. I can talk with my colleague who exports our denormalized tables. We just started doing it a couple months ago. So she may actually have some questions as she's been developing and things like that. So I can get back to Charlie if that's the best person to give our questions to.
Yeah, and we'll actually, we will post something in NPIN this, shortly and ask this question. So we'll give people some more opportunity, to go back and talk to your colleagues. And if you have any, because I think that would really help Minnesota in their presentation. I mean, we really want to make these presentations meet your needs. So think about it, talk to your colleagues, and if you have specific questions, you can either email them to us or respond to the NPIN post that we'll put. And then we'll also post any information we get on the NPIN thing. So, which kind of gives us a good segue. most of you know that we've been working, and some people might even say evangelizing the value of NPIN, and it has been a good tool. I mean, it's not a perfect tool, and there have been some issues. We've been talking to NPIN colleagues about what we think works and what doesn't, and we really wanted to give you guys an opportunity to give us some feedback, and actually there's some people from NPIN on this call. Before we do, I want to just do a quick couple of poll questions on NPIN to take your temperature, and then we'll give you some chance to give us some feedback. So our first poll question is, just so we know who's using and who isn't, how often have people in this group used the NPIN Maven collaboration website? So it looks like about half of you have used it 2 or more times. About a quarter of you just used it 1 time. And we know there have been some issues with it. There also have been some, successes with it. So that's one issue. And our next quick question is, for those of you that have used it, how satisfied are you with the NPIN site? So just give us some quick feedback on this. So it's pretty encouraging, almost 70% of you saying that you're either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. Again, it's not perfect, and I think they're learning and they're trying to improve the system. So Marvin's going to lead us in a quick discussion, and we really want to hear from you on your observations, what you think needs to be done to improve it, any kind of frustrations you're having, as well as if you thought it's been very helpful and you've used it and it's been able to answer your questions. We'd love to hear that now. So we'll open this up for about 5 or 10 minutes to have a discussion.
Okay. Recently I did meet with the NPIN group. They are under new leadership, and there's a new moderator for the group. And before I get to some of the things that we discussed, this call is about you, so we would like to hear some of your comments about the NPIN site. What do you think would be good to improve the site, or what problems have you had with the site? And any success stories that you've had with the site. We'd like to hear those as well.
So remember to unmute your phones, and we do need to hear from people. Hint. I will just, a couple of things that I've noticed, again, we've had some good conversations. I occasionally get frustrated about the password issues. It either very frequently asks for passwords, and then sometimes when it has you change them, you can't, it won't send you the email to change it, it gets a little bit frustrating. There have been some performance speed issues about uploading materials and it taking a long time. And then I think for me, one of the big issues is if I'm responding to a post, I can't attach a document. So if somebody said, here's a really good data dictionary for Maven, and I've created one, I want to say, well, here's what we've done. I have to create a whole new post, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a conversation. So those are my comments, but we'd really love to hear from at least some of you on what's working or what's not working.
So this is Robin again. I've also experienced some password annoyances. They eventually got worked out, but at far too complicated way. I think one of the strangest things about NPIN is that you get lots of updates if people have posted things, et cetera, but what you don't get is you don't actually get a notification or an email if someone has actually sent you a message on NPIN.
Yeah, and I actually talked to them about it, and I think a lot of people don't know to look at for messages on there, and so I've asked them to add some functionality where it should shoot you out an email if somebody's messaged you. So We're going to, after this call, we will be kind of collating what we hear from you, and we'll be communicating that as a big thing. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's an important issue. Other comments?
This is Toby from NPEN, and I just want to let you guys know that I'm taking down whatever kind of feedback you guys get.
Okay, so now's your chance.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said now's everybody's chance to to go to the source and give feedback.
Well, while you're waiting to get your thoughts together on NPEN, I'll go ahead and cover what I've discussed with the NPEN group. And, well, users are frustrated with having to log in, as Charlie was saying, after clicking on the link to the email notification. The reason behind this is that since they are members of a private group, there should not be another security barrier in place to get to the post. And this is getting to that frustration about entering in that password. One proposed solution was to eliminate the need to log in after clicking on the link. It should instead take you directly to the post. And another proposed solution was to include the complete post with any attachments in the email so users can decide if they need to continue on to the site by clicking onto the link and then entering their user ID and password.
Marvin?
Yes.
I have an update on that. So I spoke with Lee yesterday, and he said that, and I'm not sure if John is on, John Chandler, but he said that in a meeting that he had, they are working on a workaround so that you'll be able to reply to a post from the actual email, so you won't necessarily have to go ahead and log into the account. Similar to if you get a message on LinkedIn, how you can sometimes reply straight through your email. So he will have further updates on that, but just to let you know that that's in the works.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Another suggestion that – go ahead, Charlie. I'm sorry.
I know we're kind of running a little bit out of time. We did get a good chat question I just want to raise, if you don't mind. Raid asked about how other states are determining events in Maven using lab results. And, again, we want to make sure we meet our users' needs. So can anybody address that question for Raid? Again,
and by the way, I am copying the
question.
Okay, sure. And I'll talk slower. This is Raid from Virginia. How are other states determining events in Maven using lab results? So can one of our participants take a stab at that, who've had some success with that?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Right, are you asking specifically about when Maven should know whether to create a new event or not? Or are you asking something different than that?
Yeah, this is Ryan. Hi, Michelle. We're just trying to determine how we're going to basically control events. If, let's say, we have an event, a surplus event in our, let's say, an area event in Maven already exists, and we get another positive lab, how are we going to decide if this event would be a new event in Maven versus, merge it with the previous event?
That is the $100,000 question.
I was pretty sure, Robin, that was the question that he was asking. So I thought if I got a clarification, you might be able to expound a little bit on what you guys are doing, if you want.
I mean, I think that we do what everyone else does, and it's not elegant. We have the lab tests come into hopefully the last syphilis event that existed. Then the test goes on a workflow, and then someone in our surveillance unit will review those lab tests and determine whether or not it requires a new investigation or a new event, and then they will create a new event from there. And then if it turns out that that investigation in fact yields not a new case, in theory they merge it back to the old event. It is it is not ideal, and we have, I can't even tell you how many syphilis events requiring merging we have on our list. So it's the only way that I know how, except for some things that Washington State is working on. But that I think that that's the best case, and I've spoken with lots of other jurisdictions, and that's really the best way at this moment.
That might be a great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is for syphilis, example. What about gonorrhea and chlamydia? How would you deal with that?
Well, those are a lot easier because you can set your date threshold. So we have a threshold of 30 days. So if a lab test comes in after 30 days after the last lab test, then it creates a new event.
And that's being handled through ELR as well, if you're receiving ELRs through the same method? Yes?
Correct.
Yes.
Ryan, are you familiar with the time frame and grace period concepts?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the question, just to confirm how other states are doing it, actually.
And one of the scenario we have is that sometimes we get negative tests from our state lab, and so will the time frame and grace period take account that, it's a negative test, and go ahead and create an event, or do not create an event?
The negative lab stuff, I think, is a slightly different story because the time frame and grace period doesn't really have anything to do with the actual result of the test. A lot of our customers don't want the negative tests at all, so they just don't ask us to bring them in at all. But I think you guys are planning to have a meeting this afternoon, in fact, to talk about some more of this. And I've had some conversations with Patrick as well as some of the other people that he's talked to a bunch of people about some of this stuff. And so I think they have some proposals for you guys that you'll hear about probably in the I'm not sure when your guys' meeting is, but I think it's coming up pretty soon, right?
It's at 2:30.
Yeah, it's at 2:30.
Okay, so it'll be like an hour, or I can't calculate, half an hour from now.
So let me make a suggestion. Raid, that's a great question. If you could post that on NPIN, and then after your discussion this afternoon, if you learn anything, maybe post some responses, and this will also give everybody else an opportunity to weigh in on this after they've maybe gone back and talked to their colleagues. And we have one other question because we're getting a little bit of short time, but Tammy in Texas is interested in learning more about training materials that have been developed to train staff on Maven. And so she wants to know if project sites that have training materials, tools, and agendas, would they be willing to share them? And I think, again, the NPIN site would be a great way. Tammy, I would suggest if you could ask that question, if you need any help, Marvin or I can help with the question. We'll put it up on NPIN, and then, therefore, people can, respond and or say, here's my resources. And we've used this for some other stuff where people ask for some things around DIS staffing and, tools to use. And it was really great when people asked because we could just quickly refer them back to the NPIN site with links to where those materials are. So that's another great example to segue back to how the NPIN user site can be, and that's kind of why we sort of chose that site, because we wanted to have a site where people could upload resources and materials, because why should you develop training materials that somebody else has already been developed, and you can just tweak them for your area? So that's a great question, and again, a great example of how we can use NPIN. Okay, so I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to just move on.
One quick comment, Charlie.
Sure.
Sarah, I do apologize. My brain is crossing denormalized and denominator data. I will try to get some ELC denominator guidelines, and I will post those to the NPIN site as well. Thanks.
Great. All right. So we're going to wrap up in a minute. Just, again, we try to make these calls as good as we can. I don't know if that's good English, but we really like some feedback on, are these calls useful to you? And if they're not, let us know, and then maybe offline tell us, what we can do to improve them. We always try to improve everything we're doing. So I think it really, first of all, really want to thank everybody for really doing a great job in keeping your phones muted. We really didn't have any distractions. And I think we had a more powerful call today because we had really good dialogue and discussion. So thank you for doing that. But, we would be interested in a little bit of feedback of how the call went today and what we can do to improve it. So if you could just do a quick poll question on that. And so for at least 3/4 of you found the call useful. I know we're all busy and we want to make our time. Maybe I should close the poll quickly before the results change. But, I think it is great that at least we're meeting most of the people's needs. And for those of you that don't think that the call actually we didn't have anybody who said not useful, but if for those that said somewhat useful, then let us know how it can be a little bit more useful. Last minute things, a couple things. Again, I will be sending out the latest version of the participant list. If you could take a look at it, if you have any changes, email it back to us. And then after we get everybody's changes, we'll send it out there so we can have that out as a resource. Again, we want these calls to be useful. So if you have any topics or discussion questions for future meetings, especially for the next one on denormalized tables, please email Marvin and myself, and we'll get those to you. We continue to encourage you to post materials to NPIN. I think, Tammy's question in Texas is a good example of how we can post resources, data dictionaries, training manuals, that kind of stuff. And then lastly, again, hopefully within the next week, we will be posting the slides from today's presentation as well as a recording. So want to thank everybody for participating on the call. I think we had a great call. And we'll probably have another call in about 3 months. But continue to do great things out there and communicate. Thanks.
Have a good day, everybody. Great job, Charlie.
Thank you.